Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NTD Tonight. I'm David Zhang. Here are some of today's top stories. The UN Security Council passes a resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza. Will Israel and Hamas agree to the three-phase plan? Did Hunter Biden make large cash withdrawals for drug transactions? The prosecution and defense weighed in during today's hearing. Triple-digit temperatures bring in potentially dangerous working conditions for farmers in California. More on the impacts of the heat dome. First up, a new ceasefire resolution passed at the United Nations. It includes a three-phase plan, but it's up to Israel and Hamas to accept the deal. The UN Security Council passed on Monday afternoon a U.S. resolution that welcomes a ceasefire proposal announced by President Joe Biden and that the United States says Israel has accepted. It calls on Hamas, which initially said it viewed the proposal positively, to accept the three-phase plan. China did not block it, and Russia abstained. The draft resolution urges Israel and Hamas to fully implement these terms without delay and without condition. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken began a new visit to the Middle East on Monday and met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to push for a ceasefire. Whether Israel and Hamas agree to the three-phase ceasefire plan remains in question.
Does Hamas want to end this conflict, end this war that it started, or not? We'll find out. But it's clear that virtually the entire world has come together in support of the proposal. And the only open question is, will Hamas say yes?
This Security Council resolution advances a ceasefire plan that aims to end the 8-month war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The latest on Hunter Biden's federal gun trial. Defense attorney Abbe Noel rejected the prosecution's assertion that large cash withdrawals made by Hunter Biden could have been only for drug transactions. He said prosecution witnesses were unable to back up that assertion with detailed financial records. Earlier in Hunter Biden's trial, the defense has suggested that money could have been used to pay for rehab, though the prosecutor had countered that financial records suggested otherwise. Prosecutor Leo Wise told the jurors on Monday that, quote, no one is above the law. He urged them to convict President Joe Biden's son, Hunter. The case stems from an October 2018 gun purchase Hunter Biden made. He had the gun for 11 days and is facing 3 felony charges claiming he lied about the drug use on the gun purchase form. Apple kicked off its annual developer conference on Monday. The technology giant is expected to showcase how it is integrating artificial intelligence across its software suite. This includes a revamped Siri voice assistant and a possible tie-up with ChatGPT owner OpenAI. The company began the event by offering details on the latest operating system for its Vision Pro mixed reality headset and iPhone. It said that iOS 18, the software powering its flagship device, makes the iPhone home screen more customizable and includes improved versions of its in-house apps. Apple uses the developer conference at its Cupertino, California headquarters each year to showcase updates to its own apps and operating systems, as well as to show developers new tools that they will be able to use in their apps. A large chunk of the twisting mountain pass road collapsed in Wyoming on Saturday. It severed a well-traveled commuter link between small towns in eastern Idaho and the tourist destination of Jackson near the Grand Teton National Park. Aerial photos and drone videos shows the Teton Pass Road with a part of the guardrail dangling and orange traffic drums marking off the danger area. The road was closed at the time of the collapse. The section that failed first drew attention Thursday when a crack and a drop in the road caused the motorcycle to crash. It's unclear how long it will take to rebuild the road. Summer is coming and some areas are seeing extreme temperatures early. Some farm workers are battling the huge temperature swing.
A massive high-pressure system, known as a heat dome, stalled over the U.S. Southwest and pushed temperatures to a region well above 100 degrees on June 7th, leaving millions of Americans to swelter. In California's agricultural region in the Central Valley, farmers are struggling with the high temperatures.
Monday we were in the mid-80s, and now we ramp up to 104, 105 is what they're predicting today. I mean, that's a huge temperature swing, 20 degrees in 3 days. So I think there are definitely drastic changes coming. With these extreme heats, it makes things very difficult. We don't have a very reliable grid sometimes, so it's hard to implement technology, and that's something that would actually help us out a lot. Sometimes we don't have the best internet out here or cell activity, so it's difficult to deal with that as well.
It's hard to work in the heat, especially here in the grapes. If it's 90 degrees outside, in the grapes it's 4 or 5 degrees hotter. And then it depends on the humidity too. The heat feels worse and it's a bit hard, complicated.
California, Colorado, Minnesota, Oregon, and Washington lead the nation with state-level heat safety regulations. In April, the Federal Department of Labor and Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, presented a draft for a regulatory framework to an advisory committee. It unanimously recommended OSHA to move forward with seeking input from the public to finalize its rule. Palomar said some contractors sometimes don't adhere to the laws.
Put more attention on the farm workers because we're essential, and for them to worry more. There'd be more severe laws for the contractors, for the companies that don't want to accept them. It would be amazing if they paid attention to us.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported more than 2,300 people died from heat-related illness last summer.
A lawsuit challenging the COVID-19 vaccine mandate in the Los Angeles School District has been revived by a federal appeals court. The court noted that the record is unclear on whether the vaccines prevent the transmission of COVID-19. NTD's Christina Corona has more on the story.
The Health Freedom Defense Fund and other challengers argue that the mandate violated due process and equal protection rights of district employees. They claim that the vaccines, unlike traditional ones, are not effective in preventing infection. The U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the lawsuit, saying the district had a history of changing its vaccination policies during the case, which dismissed lawsuits challenging expired COVID-19 rules because the policies were no longer in effect. However, U.S. District Judge Dale Fisher dismissed the case in 2022, ruling that even if COVID-19 vaccines do not prevent infection, mandates can still be imposed under a 1905 U.S. Supreme Court decision, citing that the vaccines reduce symptoms and prevent severe illness and death. On June 7th, a Ninth Circuit panel reversed the ruling, finding that Judge Fisher had extended the 1905 Jacobson v. Massachusetts decision beyond its public health rationale to include forced medical treatment for the recipient's benefit. U.S. Circuit Judge Ryan Nelson, writing for the 2-to-1 majority, said, "At this stage, we must accept plaintiffs' allegations that the vaccine does not prevent the spread of COVID-19 as true. And because of this, Jacobson does not apply." However, the district's lawyers noted that a U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention publication describes the COVID-19 vaccine as safe and effective, but it does not specifically address their effectiveness against transmission. We reached out to LAUSD for a comment, but did not hear back by airtime. Christina Corona, NTD News.
A plan to build student housing in People's Park near UC Berkeley will move forward after the state Supreme Court ruled in the university's favor in a suit trying to stop the development. NTD's Christina Corona has more details on the story.
The California Supreme Court ruled Thursday that People's Park, a site with a rich history of protest and counterculture since the Vietnam War, can be converted into student housing for UC Berkeley. This would conclude a long legal battle over the landmark. The court determined that a law passed in 2023 rendered invalid the arguments made by 2 local organizations that sued the school, contending that increasing the number of students living in downtown Berkeley would contribute to noise pollution in an already densely populated area. However, Chief Justice Patricia Guerrero stated in the unanimous decision that the new law removes any obstacle to the People's Park housing project. UC Berkeley faces a housing shortage, with some students sleeping in cars, staying on friends' couches, or resorting to long commutes to attend classes. The court observed that Berkeley offers housing to the smallest proportion of students compared to other institutions in the UC system. In the academic year 2023 through 2024, UC Berkeley provided housing for nearly 10,000 students, which accounts for approximately only 22% of the university's total student population of 45,699. UC Berkeley plans to build a $312 million housing complex for approximately 1,100 of its students on the nearly 3-acre People's Park, which is owned by the university. Christina Corona, NTD News.
We'll take a short break now, everybody, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come back. Which cities are considered the dirtiest in the country? What qualifies a city as dirty? A new study aims to find out. A new monument created in Southern California to remember the people who died from the persecution under the Chinese Communist Party. People reflect on the impacts of the ideology. In the world of boxing, Ryan Garcia speaks out after being hospitalized following an arrest at Beverly Hills Hotel. Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight. Welcome back to NTD Tonight. I'm your host, David Zhang. A recent study has named the dirtiest cities in the U.S., exploring factors that can contribute to urban pollution. Here's NTD's BJ King with more details.
I'm standing here in Ontario, one of 7 Californian cities listed in the top 20 dirtiest cities in the United States, according to a recent study. Join us as we cover what factors might be affecting your city's cleanliness.
The study, published by lawn care provider LawnStarter, analyzed more than 150 major cities across the U.S. They utilized data from environmental organizations such as the EPA, CDC, Department of Energy, and more. Factors such as pollution, living conditions, and infrastructure were considered for what defines a city as dirty. Topping the list were cities such as Houston, Texas, and Newark, New Jersey, with Houston suffering under poor air quality due to the petrochemical facilities which violate EPA guidelines and a rampant pest problem. The study also considered resident satisfaction with cleanliness in their city. Findings show that a concentration of considerably low satisfaction ratings was reported in the Inland Empire area, with San Bernardino being the 3rd dirtiest city in the U.S. according to Consumer Reports. However, Governor Gavin Newsom has highlighted dissatisfaction with urban cleanliness as a sentiment shared among all Californians.
It's a frustration that we all have about our state. You drive around and you wonder, who's responsible? Why isn't that cleaned up? Why is that graffiti there? Why are all these encampments? I spend more money on taxes every single year. Clean it up. Do your job. People are frustrated.
In the top 20 were 7 Californian cities, several of which were ranked for worst air quality and highest landfill waste to resident ratio. The state's pollution and garbage problems have been a focus for the governor, having created the Clean California initiative to combat the issue.
Since we announced this in July of 2021, they have as much garbage that would fill the entire Golden Gate Bridge 670 times that has been cleaned up because of the Clean California initiative. And yes, there's about 6,000 more that we need to actually do. And so we're mindful of what we have to do going forward.
Despite California's rankings in the study, the Clean California Initiative published an interactive map last month that shows the impact of 319 beautification projects. BJ Kang, NTD News, California.
The Supreme Court has agreed to hear an appeal from Facebook related to a massive data breach at the social media company.
The case centers on how much information was disclosed to investors about damage caused by the breach. Facebook says it was open about the potential harm caused by the Cambridge Analytica data breach, a political consulting firm. It involved the private information of millions of Facebook users that was obtained by Cambridge Analytica. Meta agreed in December 2022 to pay out $725 million to settle a class action proceeding that said the company permitted third parties, including Cambridge Analytica, to gain access to as many as 87 million users' personal information. The incident was made public in 2018. Cambridge Analytica previously worked for then-candidate Donald Trump's presidential campaign in 2016 and had access to personal data from millions of Facebook accounts for purposes of targeting and profiling voters. The account holders didn't consent and had their data harvested by means of an app. The scandal led to government investigations, and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg was called to testify before Congress. In 2019, Facebook agreed to pay just over $5 billion to settle charges with federal regulators over the scandal. But investigators have argued that they didn't disclose enough about the damage caused by the breach. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed, allowing the lawsuit against Facebook to proceed. The High Court's decision in the case is expected next year.
In less than a century, communist regimes like the one in China have contributed to the deaths of tens of millions of people around the world. Some survivors of the Chinese Communist state just created a new monument at Liberty Sculpture Park in California, and all in remembrance of those who tragically died. Let's turn to NTD's Bill Thomas for more.
On a hot sunny day in the small community of Yermo, which sits in the Mojave Desert in San Bernardino County, California, many people came to see the Monument for Victims of Communism and to remember the 35th anniversary of the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. To some Americans, such as Eric Hendrickson, this monument is a great reminder of the tragic impact which communist leaders have had on their countrymen.
I'm afraid that a lot of Americans don't really know as much about communism. We're taught a lot about Nazism, which indeed is incredibly evil, but a lot of people are not quite as aware about communism.
Hendrickson encourages people to look at how communism is practiced as opposed to what it means in theory.
And I think they look at it as an ideology that means well, but they don't look at the real-world consequences of it. And as a result, we have people who think that Cuba is a good situation. They think that China has some human rights violations, but they kind of excuse it.
Hendrickson believes it's important for victims of communism to get out, share their stories, and inform the public.
Honestly, I think we just need a lot more Chinese people, Huaren, as well as Cubans and others, to educate, and I think art is a great medium to do so.
Wei Ming Chen, the sculptor of the monument, says history should be kept for future generations to learn from.
I think this is very miserable history. We should remember this history. If we forgot this happening, maybe communist coming back.
According to Ruohui Yang, chief director of a Canadian-Chinese democracy activist group called Assembly of Citizens, the younger generation needs to be more proactive and take precautionary measures against the threat of communism.
They might utilize these kind of left-wing young people or like communist parties like to actually influence our democracy and freedom. So we need to be cautious about these kind of conditions.
Hendrickson says that communism is fundamentally about envy.
I think that a lot of people think it looks good on paper. It doesn't. It's an ideology of envy. It's an ideology of jealousness. It's an ideology that at the end of the day doesn't value the individual or the individual's work. It requires people to basically be slaves to other people's wants and needs.
To gain a more clear understanding regarding the severe consequences that communism has wreaked upon so many generations, you're encouraged to visit Liberty Sculpture Park or check out the website libertysculpturepark.com. Bill Thomas and Jimmy Ma, NTD News, Yermo, California.
Up next in sports, boxing sensation Ryan Garcia finds himself in hot water after a weekend arrest for felony vandalism. NTD's Carlos Reyes has the details.
Ryan Garcia, one of boxing's brightest young stars, found himself in hot water over the weekend following an arrest for felony vandalism at the Waldorf Astoria in Beverly Hills. The Beverly Hills Police Department reported that Garcia caused over $15,000 in damages to a hotel room and a hallway. The incident began with a call about an intoxicated person, leading officers to Garcia, who was a registered guest at the hotel. The 25-year-old was subsequently taken to Cedar Sinai Medical Center for evaluation after complaining about a medical issue while in custody. On social media, Garcia voiced his distress, tweeting, "I'm worried. I have to be at this weird hospital and they are going to give me medicine and they have me on hold for who knows how long. They will determine. Pray for me. God help me." This arrest adds to an already troubling period for Garcia, who recently faced scrutiny for testing positive for banned substances before and after his April 20th fight against Devin Haney. Despite winning the bout, Garcia's erratic behavior and missed weight overshadowed his victory. He previously admitted to drinking heavily in the lead-up to the fight. Garcia's legal team attributed his recent troubles to his mother's breast cancer diagnosis, emphasizing his ongoing mental health struggles. His attorney, Darren Chavez, released a statement highlighting the emotional burden Garcia is under and the importance of support and understanding from fans. As Garcia awaits a court date and the possibility of formal charges, his future in the ring hangs in the balance. Carlos Reyes, NTD News.
Stay tuned for China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer coming up next. And in more China news, a graphic video clip showing the aftermath of a reported stabbing in China and the 4 foreigners victimized. NTD reached out to Western embassies in China for details. More on what we learned. Coming up on China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And that's all we've got for you tonight. We'd like you to join us again on NTD Tonight every weekday at 9 p.m. I'm David Zhang. Have a wonderful evening.